All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jason Reminick. I'm the CEO and founder of Thalamus. I'm joined by several members of my team tonight and also thalamus.org. And we are really excited for this next installment of the Pathway to Residency webinar series. Yeah, a big thank you again to our partners across the board, and looking forward to this year-long series. Again, for those of you that were here last time, or just as a quick reminder, or weren't here last time, and as a quick reminder, thalamus.org is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit that is building a stronger physician workforce together. It was created to defray the costs of applying to residency. And we have several other programs, including this. Jamie Thayer Skates, the CEO of thalamus.org, is here again tonight. And thanks for joining us again, Jamie. And we're also putting this on with Thalamus, our uh, Thalamus, which is a public benefit corporation as well. We described that last time, but really we are leaning into ensuring greater access to affordable, high-quality medical education and training, addressing systemic inequities in the physician workforce, and delivering better healthcare outcomes for patient and society, alongside a much broader mission to ensure the right doctors are in the right hospitals to treat the right patients. Those of you that may not be aware, we are the most used interview management platform built by GME for GME. We work with 85% of programs across the country, over 500,000 physicians over the last 13 years. We also work as part of a strategic collaboration with the Association of American Medical Colleges and have since April of 2023, and we're excited to continue that this year and into the future as well. Again, this is our team. We have over 200 plus years of GME experience across the company as applicants, program coordinators, administrators, managers, program directors, designated institutional officials, and otherwise. These are many of the folks on our team who will be speakers over the course of the series. We will have other special guests as well, but I will be your main host tonight, and then we'll be expanding our team for the third session and the fourth session with several of the folks on these slides. Some are in the room tonight to help us manage the webinar as well. So excited to continue providing you great content from our subject matter experts. Again, this series is very data-driven. We've collected millions of data points over the last 13 recruitment seasons. We've approached GME from a research perspective, from an economics perspective. We have different consultants alongside our product and technology folks and data scientists and data engineers and GME experts who are really looking at this process from every which way, shape, or form to make it easier for applicants to apply to residency and programs to recruit applicants to residency and fellowship as well. Again, just to kind of cover the main agenda for the Pathway to Residency series, we're at the second session. The third session will take a few weeks off as the academic year gets started, and just to give our folks time to get going. But we have our next session on July 15th. It will be a little bit earlier. We're trying different times, as I mentioned last time. It'll be 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We would appreciate feedback on that also. And then the fourth session is scheduled for July 30th at 8 p.m. Prior to the third session, we will have the dates for most of at least the next block, and hopefully for the remainder of the series. We are also, based on your feedback, we are posting uh, uh, these sessions to YouTube. You can see them on Thalamus GME, which is our YouTube channel. Sarah, if you could post that in the chat so everyone has it. And so if you need to review the first session, you'll be able to see that there. We will post all of the subsequent sessions there as well. We are not going to post the Q&A because we want to keep this a safe space to ask your questions and not have them posted on the internet. So the Q&A will remain private. We will edit that out. So we want that also to give that the benefit to those folks who are joining us live as well. So if you have questions, please join us live. We're more than happy to answer them as we did last time and going forward into the session as well. And so yeah, we'll dive into the second session here. Which is more than a checklist, completing your application and understanding the signals you send. And this will be very focused on the residency application itself. It will preview some of the other components of this process, but it is really to go through the application alongside preference signals. And so the main outline for tonight is to go through the application process. We will touch briefly on the interview season and the match with some topics that relate to the application as well. Along the way, we'll go through some myths and facts of the application process, which we will extend further in coming weeks also, but there will be some of that tonight as well, which we'll get into, and we'll definitely be touching a lot on preference signals tonight as well. Kind of reviewing last time in terms of the first session, it was very much about understanding and building the narrative of what you're looking to accomplish in your residency application and in your career journey as a physician. And so that lesson will aid very well tonight, as we kind of discussed last time. I hope everyone's sort of kind of started to think about their narrative and how they're going to tell their story and how that story is going to translate to the programs reviewing your application. And tonight, we're going to take elements of that narrative and add it into your application to create that story and that narrative form your application that will be shared with programs who will assess your alignment educationally with their program or whatever other criteria they're evaluating and make their selection decisions and who to decide to interview and ultimately where to then rank various candidates alongside your ranking, which of course determines the outcomes of the match, which we'll review in other sessions as well. And so, again, behind every application is a story. And so you want to help the programs, be it the program director, the program coordinator, various faculty, program residents, the chief residents that may be interviewing you, understand the full picture of who you are as an applicant, be it your why, your growth, your impact, or your future. These are all very busy folks who are receiving many, many applications. And so a lot of what we'll focus on tonight is also how to craft that narrative in a streamlined way, in a concise way, so that it really pops when they read your application during the review process and during the application process itself. And so this is the physician educational pathway. We spend a lot of our time at Thalamus thinking about this pathway. You can extend it out even earlier. Many folks decide to become physicians in elementary school or middle school, high school, or somewhere along that way. Some decide to do it post-college. But what we're talking about obviously here is this UME to GME transition, where you're transitioning from medical school into residency. And one of the things when I give this talk, and I've given various versions of this talk over the last decade, this one specifically, it's one, take a step to congratulate yourselves that you're at this point. There is a very, very small percentage of humans that make it to this point, and I think that should be celebrated in itself. You are about to enter into a match process that is a process. It is a designed process. It is a process designed with various rules and guardrails and outcomes, and that outcome is driven by a mathematical algorithm called the match that decides who matches and who does not. And again, for those of you that match, outstanding. That's awesome. For those of you that don't match, that doesn't define you as a human either. These are part of the processes of going through this process overall. And I think it's just very important to assess that. I've been wanting to be a physician since I was 12. I stopped practicing clinically 7 years ago. And that was something I never would have imagined. I miss taking care of patients. I matched into what many would consider a dream residency in a dream specialty, in a career that I would have been very satisfied with, but I found a different passion and different calling, and life happens. And if all of you took a snapshot of your life at this moment tonight and then looked at it a year later, or 5 years later, or 10 years later, your priorities are also going to change. And so my general advice in everything here is go along the ride, go along with the flow. The future is unpredictable. The future will surprise you, and things will happen to you that may seem great, that may not be great in retrospect, or things not so great may happen to you that may be the best thing ever happened to you in retrospect. Also, your preferences are going to change. What specialty you may want to practice might change. What part of the country you want to train in, what institution you want to train at. All of those things may change over time. And even after you get to residency, you may go to residency because you're excited about a fellowship at a particular institution. And you may decide after training there as a resident, I want to go somewhere else. This is very much a journey. There are many great training institutions around the country, and there are probably more than one or several or many institutions that could make you into a great physician and help you achieve the goals of what you want to do, be that to treat certain patient populations or otherwise. So I think it's just important to remember that up front. Tonight, as I mentioned, will be very focused on the application. It really will be a lot of focusing on the checklist overall. Last time was very visually based on some of the slides I showed here. There's some element of that tonight, but this will be structured more towards kind of a general lecture kind of style. We'll save questions throughout and at the end. If you have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. We'll save plenty of times for questions at the end as well. And thank you to many of you who submitted your questions leading up to the session that went into a lot of the prep for this deck, and happy to answer some of those questions as well tonight, depending on how many questions we get. So let's talk about the residency application process. I'm going to focus from the perspective of ERIS, the Electronic Residency Application Service. There are other residency applications. There's SF Match for those applying to ophthalmology, and there's Residency Cast for those applicants that are applying to emergency medicine and obstetrics and gynecology. There are multiple matches as well, which we'll talk about. And so I will be sure to touch on all of those as I go, but I will use ERIS as kind of our main anchor points tonight. Overall, the residency application process seems to be becoming pretty complex each year. This used to be able to be done in several less slides when there was less application providers and less match providers and preference signals weren't a thing. You know, back in my day when you had to apply up to residency uphill in the snow both ways, it was very different. But there's some things that have gotten much better as well. At the same time, yeah, trying to use Eris kind of as kind of the framework. It's the most structured. The other application systems and other matches and overall processes kind of fit into all of those. If you're going through the military match, that's another kind of permutation of this process as well. But the 2026 season, the season prior to this one, just ended on May 31st, and the new season started on June 4th, 2026, which is a few weeks ago. So if you're an applicant, you can consume your ERIS token and begin working on your ERIS application now if you're applying to residency this year. And you have up into, you can't do anything with your application other than work on it up to September 2nd, 2026. Once you hit September 2nd, 2026, you can start submitting your application. It does not matter if you submit it on September 2nd, September 3rd, September 10th, September 20th, September 21st, September 22nd, or any time up until September 23rd at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That is when programs begin reviewing your application. Your application is on time as long if it gets in at 8:59 a.m. Eastern Time on September 23rd. I would not recommend that. But the important thing is you want your application to be in before 9 a.m. Eastern on September 23rd. Not 9:01, not 9:05, or any time after that. Obviously, to the best of your ability. And you want to try and submit it as complete an application as possible. For international medical graduates who need to certify through the ECFMG, and they essentially act as your medical school for those that have gone to medical school outside of the United States, whether you're a U.S. citizen IMG or non-U.S. citizen IMG. Sometimes application processing can be delayed. Please get things in as soon as you can within your own power. If for some reason your application is delayed for something outside of your power, I would let programs know that you're applying to, or at least the ones that you feel very strongly about applying to as well. And I think one of the key lessons here is beyond the softwares and the technology and the internet, there are people on all sides of these processes. There are people here at Thalamus working that are here to help you. There are people at all of these organizations that are here to help you. And there are people on the program sides who are here to help you as well. Obviously, approach everyone respectfully, professionally, etc. But doing so, there are people who are willing to help you. If for some reason you're working through this process and you kind of come across those that aren't willing to help you, I think that's also a really important signal to see through the process of how they're treating applicants through the process. And can also be a signal on where you eventually decide to train as well. Just remember, you're interviewing programs and assessing programs as much as they are interviewing you. And then we'll go through the rest of the process, but technically, match day is, for the NRMP, it's the third Friday in March. For the other matches, ophthalmology matches sooner, urology matches sooner. And so that kind of all happens over the year alongside the interview season, which we'll cover. And then the season technically ends on May 31st. But by that time, that really isn't that critical of a date for applicants, but just to be complete. Your application has lots of different components. You have the ERIS application, which is your kind of contact information, your address, who you are as an applicant, some other informations about characteristics about you, etc. There is a personal statement, which is your essay of why you want to be the doctor that you want to be. There are your letters of recommendations, which may be your narrative letters of recommendations or your standardized letters of evaluations or SLOs in some specialties, which are more standard letters that some specialties have. They take all different names. Sometimes they're slurs, but these are standardized letters that were created by specialties, which will be rolling out in a greater number of specialties over the coming years. So one advice here is uh, try to know if your specialties do slows or slurs. There are various resources online to assess that as well. There's the medical student performance evaluation, the MSPE or Dean's letter, that is a summative letter of all of your clinical experience and other key components of your education throughout medical school. There's the medical school transcript itself, your grades on your transcripts. There's a photo, and then there's a USMLE and or COMLEX transcript for international medical graduates. There's an ECFMG certification, and there may be some other forms as well. But these components make up a residency application. If you're using SF Match or Residency Cast, the applications are also incredibly similar between the two. If you're applying to specialties across that use different applications, you'll have to fill out the different applications overall as well. The fees for residency applications are all pretty standard. They have slightly different pricing schema, but essentially it allows you to apply to a certain number of programs in ERIS. The first 30 applications are $11 per application per each specialty you apply to, and then 31 or more is $30 more each additional application. We will talk about kind of numbers of applications as well throughout this process and kind of what that means, particularly in the realm of preference signals, depending on the specialty that you're applying to. I would say in terms of looking at how you're applying, I would look at each specialty. I would look at the number of preference signals. I would determine how many signals they have, which in some specialties acts as an application cap or a proxy that will go proxy for an application cap that will go through. We're actually applying to more specialties beyond programs in a specialty beyond the number of signals may be incredibly disadvantageous from a probability standpoint. We'll talk about that tonight. But this is a personal decision as to how many programs and how many specialties you applied to. I myself applied to pediatrics and anesthesia separately. I also applied to combined pediatrics and anesthesiology programs, of which there were very few. I ended up matching at one of those, but I had to have backups and also, needed to understand what specialty and what programs and what institutions were of interest to me as I was going through this whole process. The fee calculator resets with each specialty that you apply to. And so just be aware of that. There are fee calculators for all of the various application services, and you can use that to assess the fees. These are not the only fees in the process, but these are the application fees to start. This process can be quite costly. It's one of the reasons we created thalamus.org as well. But those are the fees. Application submission itself is submitted through the application service. For ophthalmology, that's SF Match, as I mentioned, and for OBGYN and EM, that's Residency Cast, and for all other residency specialties, it's MyEris. And so overall, the application itself is usually straightforward contact information, publications, and more. There were some updates for ERIS 2026 that I'll mention here. We have other updates for ERIS 2027, and ERIS 2027 is the upcoming application season that is starting right now, where applications will be released to programs at the end of September. And so the updates For ERAS 2026, there were some structural changes to the interruptions in postgraduate education session. There were also three pilot features at various specialty levels across different specialties, where there was geographic preference signaling, which we'll go over, where some specialties decided to opt out of that. There were some short answer essay questions that were specialty specific, which came about last year and seem to be continuing this year. And then there are some program signal statements. So we'll go over what program signals are tonight. These are essentially tokens that you're given to show interest to programs. Some specialties piloted a new thing last year where you could describe why you sent the signal to each program in that specialty, and that was used last year as well. The AAMC and ERIS lists all of the programs that are participating in this. We'll go through some of these resources tonight as well. To access the applications, you usually need a token, which in this case is normally a specialized link to access the application system that is provided by your medical school for students that went to medical school in the US. For international medical graduates, that token access is provided by the ECFMG and Intel, and payment of fees is required to submit your application. Some tips in terms of application submission. We would highly recommend using a personal email address and not a university or .edu email address. The reasons for this are many. It's a personal choice, so please feel free to use whatever email you like. Programs will not care what your email address is or says. No one will notice, no one will look at it. If you use a Gmail address versus if you use a prestigious institution's address, I do not believe that will give you any statistically significant leg up in matching or being interviewed by a program. The reason we recommend a personal email address is several fold, but it comes down to the fact that if you use a Gmail address, for instance, you have full control of that domain. There aren't kind of security filters and other filters that hospitals and institutions need to prevent cyber attacks and otherwise, which can actually slow down delivery of emails. It can also strip emails and attachments to emails. It can sometimes quarantine emails that you will not have you will have not received. And it also can result in actually emails getting to you slower because of getting these filters. We've actually studied this on the thalamus end and did a peer-reviewed academic study on this. And there was a statistically significant difference from those folks that use .com and kind of personal email addresses receiving invitations from us several minutes faster than those using a university email. This is not because our system sends favorably to one or the other. This is just the transit time of emails into .com versus university email systems. I can't stress this point enough. Please use a personal email address. Also, make sure your email address is correct. And I will say it again, make sure your email address is correct. Type it into your application, check it again, check it 3 times, check it the next day, check it 5 times after that. Take it to some friends, show some friends and family members, and make sure your email address is correct. The one part of your application you do not want to make a typo in is your email address. It happens to a handful of applicants every year, usually less than 5 or so that we're aware of. What it does is it means you're not going to get messages and sometimes invitations or communications from programs outside of messaging systems, but it definitely won't come to your email inbox if your email address is not correct. So please double, triple, quadruple check that. You can use whatever email name and address you'd like, be it Johns Jones Eris 2027 at gmail.com. It's fine. Try to avoid unusual characters that can sometimes result in some quirky things happening with email overall. First name dot last name, numbers, letters, that tends to work best. Just again, the application process is expensive. I would also recommend applying broadly, but don't apply to programs that are significantly out of reach or you have no interest in. If you're, I wish it was a little bit more transparent to the community what programs accept what, or if the, programs' websites were more up to date, or there were minimal criteria that were listed on all websites. Some programs do it, not all do. If you're an international medical graduate and the program has never recruited an international medical graduate, that's probably a good clue not to apply at that program, not necessarily because they even don't wouldn't want to recruit an international medical graduate. Sometimes, and in many times, they just can't even accept the visa that you need or sponsor any visas for that matter. And so, trying to provide some tips and tricks. There's lots of services online that can help you understand which programs sponsor certain visas or not. Sometimes programs list this on their website. This is a pretty dynamic situation overall, but just trying to give some insight here too. As I've mentioned throughout the series so far, the best advice I can give also is try not to get caught up in the anxiety of the process. It doesn't help you in any way. It just allows you to be anxious. And of course, that's super easy for me or anyone to say. But at the same time, kind of best practices, if I could go back and be less anxious about the process, I would feel better about it as well. A little anxiety along the way is always very, good in a survival tactic. But whether it's in medical school, applying to residency, in residency, try not to get caught up in the anxiety. I think it results in just a better experience overall. And again, apply on time with a full application to the best of your ability and try to get that your application in as needed, pending obviously letters or things out of your control. But try to make sure your letter writers get them in as soon as possible. For some standardized letters of evaluations, those tend to come in later sometimes, and in some specialties, programs don't start reviewing applications until several weeks after that date as well. But it is very much specialty and program dependent there. Personal statements. These are essays that outline who you are and why you want to apply into the specialty you're applying to. If you're applying to multiple specialties and even to multiple programs, you can submit different drafts to each specialty and each program. Be aware that programs know this. Programs will also spend time, again, circling back to your narrative, comparing the personal statement that you've submitted to them to the rest of your application. There are many sections of the application, like your most impactful experiences, publications, and otherwise, that are standard across every program you apply to, regardless of whatever specialty. Obviously, if you're applying to specialties that use different application systems, you have some flexibility there, where if you're applying in residency CAS, you can of course tailor your application to OBGYN and or EM, and then also tailor your application to another specialty if you're applying in ARIS and for SF Match and otherwise. But within a single application system, there are elements of the application that are standard across all of the specialties that use that application system, and programs can, may, and will compare your personal statement to the rest of your application to see if that narrative is fully comprehensive. And they'll pick up sometimes on nuances if it's different. That's not to say you can make a completely standard application for all programs. I'm not discouraging people to apply to multiple specialties. Having applied to multiple specialties myself, I submitted obviously a different draft to the pediatrics programs versus the anesthesia programs versus the combined peds and anesthesia programs. You should as well. Just want you to be aware of just how programs are looking at that application to build that narrative overall. Don't rehash your application though. Include something new. As we talked about, narrative's powerful. Tell a narrative. Uh, Someone asked last time about starting with quotes. Um, Again, something unique. Also, try not to preach too much about what it's like to practice the specialty we know. We know what it's like being in the OR as anesthesiologists. We know about physiology and the anesthesia machine and the beeps and the boops and the breathing tubes and the laryngoscopes and the intubations and the like. It doesn't mean you can't bring those things up as part of the narrative, as part of your experience as to why you want to practice the specialty, right? I talked last time about that interaction between patient and doctor in that anesthesia pre-op prior to taking patients back to the OR. I shared with you last time really the visual representation of my personal statement as well. And if you're not going to do that tonight, but if you want to look back in the first session, please do as well. Again, tell that narrative. Everyone loves a story. It allows us to find shared meaning and connection. You can write a really powerful personal statement that can help your application. You can also write a really poor personal statement that can hurt your application. That's harder to do. Again, AI can be used. I would use it as a first draft or a way to get ideas, but I would very much make the language your own. I would know every single piece of my personal statement because programs will ask you about it. By the time I was done with my personal statement, I could basically recite it from memory. There was so many different drafts and iterations of it that happened. And so, try to craft that narrative as to what you want the programs to understand about you and why you want to pursue that particular specialty, patient population, career path, etc. Letters of recommendation, who writes your letters matter. At least one letter from your specialty in most specialties. Sometimes it's more. As I mentioned, certain specialties have standardized letters of evaluation or recommendations, SLOs or SLORs. Uh, uh, Emergency medicine, obstetrics and gynecology, orthopedic surgery, psychiatry. There are several others happening this year in dermatology and plastic surgery and urology. Understand if the specialty you're applying to needs a standardized letter of evaluation. Each specialty has its own guidance, be that on the specialty's website or the Organization of Program Director Associations has particular and helpful guides with that as well. ChatGPT and Google will find you resources as well. And so just be aware of what those are. But these are standardized letters that are usually written by a faculty member or a panel of faculty members that have standardized rubrics that they use to rate you. And specialties use these as a key tool for evaluating that. Make sure your letter writers know who you are and that you trust them. You want to make sure the people who are going to write a strong letter for you. That is not as always the case. And in most cases, you're going to need to waive your right to view your letter and will never see the letter. Also know that medicine is a small world. You'd be surprised who knows one another, even if they practice on different sides of the country or different sides of the world. People have trained with each other at various points in their career and have moved all around the country and world. They see each other at conferences and at other specialty specific things. And so letters of recommendation are important. The medical student performance evaluation, MSPE or Dean's letter, is written by your medical school. Most students, in most cases, review and or sign off on it. It's an effort to standardize medical school performance. It's improving, but it is not really what I would call standard. It's not standard when you compare schools, either MD schools or DO schools in the US, and certainly not standard when you include the international medical graduate population as well. It is better than kind of complete variability, but the length of these letters are different. The schools are all using different grading structures and course names and different scales and different grade distributions as well. That said, this letter is very heavily reviewed. Whether programs are using AI to review applications or using whatever sort of system they're using, I would say that this is one of the most viewed documents. One, because it allows them to assess performance on sub-Is. Two, it allows them, if you have interruptions in your medical school performance, they will read this word for word as humans. They will read and review this letter. Program directors spend a lot of time looking at this letter and contextualizing your application. And so just want you to be aware of that. They will review this letter. They will also help them understand your school's grading structure, and it will also include the narrative comments from from your clinical performance, which is the way that they would access all of this language overall as well. We have no tool that summarizes these letters for the programs. As I mentioned, we have tools that we'll cover in other sessions that help to assess kind of grades across your core clerkships and assessing the scales of the grading systems to provide a more apples to apples comparison. But they will review this letter as a primary document almost universally when they are doing a holistic review of your application. Transcripts. Medical school transcripts are provided by your medical school or for international medical graduates through the ECFMG Intel and provided through your medical school to that organization. For USMLE and COMLEX transcripts, these need to be requested through the certifying body. In the past, this was the NBME and the MBOME. For the NBME this year, the transcripts are actually being requested through the FSMB, the Federation of State Medical Boards. You can find information about that online in various instances and places as well. The application photo. This photo matters. It will follow you through your residency training. You can take a professional photo in professional dress. That can mean a lot of different things. I think it would, key to show your personality. You do not need to hire a photographer to take professional photos. You can go in a backyard and find a green background and an iPhone or an Android or otherwise. Many cell phones have good enough cameras to take the headshot that you need for your application. I would ask my family members and friends for feedback, real feedback. This is a a job application process, essentially. You want to make sure and understand that you're applying for application to programs all throughout the country with people that have different beliefs. And so you want to make sure you're displaying yourself, but it's not going to impact your application in any way. Ensure the photo is uploaded in proper orientation. Some programs screen out photos until much later in the application process, but this is still how they're going to use, how they're going to remember you when they're creating a rank list. This photo may follow you when you start residency into the new intern guide, or the photo montages that they include with the programs overall as well. Just another reminder about this application photo. For 2027 ERIS application updates, there's scholarly work on publications. The prior publication session has been rebranded as scholarly work. It will allow you to list scholarly collections. Instead of listing multiple outputs from a single project separately, you now must group them. So an abstract, poster, and manuscript into a single theme-based portfolio entry. You can decide what's important and impactful from there. There are most meaningful highlights. You can designate up to 3 of these projects as your most meaningful, allowing you to explain your specific contributions, authorship role, and why the work mattered to your career. Recommendation letters on the ERIS side must now be submitted through the new AAMC letter writer portal. There are some slow pilots, as I mentioned, in urology, plastics, and dermatology this year. And we just talked about the USMLE transcript as being fully centralized under the Federation for State Medical Boards. So these are the key application updates for ERIS for this year. The other applications tend to have other updates as well, and I would refer you to those sites to look for that too. All right, so we went through the application. There is one key piece of the application which we really haven't focused on yet, which I think requires its own focus, and that is preference and really how that relates to other signals in the application. And so, what are preference signals? Preference signals is a concept that came out of economics for economics professor jobs, where if you were living in Maine but wanted to get a job in Arizona, the way you would signal and show the program that you really wanted to potentially work in Arizona was you would send them a signal. And in this market, people were given 2 preference signals. And so if you were spending one, it was a high, what's called opportunity cost, which meant that you only had 2. So if you sent them one, that had real meaning. GME has evolved that process where every specialty has essentially decided how many preference signals it's going to use. This started as much smaller numbers of preference signals across the board, but every year has changed kind of every year with each specialty. And there are 3 buckets essentially. And so there are the small signaling specialties that have kind of 5 or fewer signals. There are the big signaling specialties, which I would say have over 15 signals and sometimes up to 30 signals. And then there are specialties that use what are called 2-tiered signaling. So you have gold and silver tiers, where gold is a stronger signal than silver. We will go through in a second the reference ERIS uses to tell you which specialties fall into which bucket and how many signals that they have. The first thing I would do as I'm picking my specialties is I would understand the number of signals that the specialty has. You can think of these like roses from The Bachelor, or kind of tokens or money that you can spend that show preference in applying to a program. The small signals kind of function similar to what I mentioned about economics. If you have 5 or less signals, if you're spending one of them, there's an opportunity cost. You only have so many. The programs know you're pretty strongly preferring them. For the big signaling ones, these essentially function as a proxy for an application cap. So orthopedic surgery has 30 preference signals. And so since they know that there are 30, if you do not signal a program, uh, they know they're not in your top 30, or at least in your top 30 at the time of signaling. And so your odds of receiving an interview, as the kind of literature has shown, for a program you haven't signaled in a big signaling specialty is single-digit percentages to less than 1%. It is highly, highly, highly unlikely uh, because it's kind of functioning as an application cap. What that means, if you're applying into one of these specialties with big signals, is I would not apply too far above the number of signals. So if the application has 30 signals, I wouldn't apply to 100 programs because the incremental cost of you paying all of those application fees, the odds of you getting one additional interview out of that is already exceedingly low, and more than one, even less so. Doesn't mean someone wouldn't, but overall, the odds don't really help you there. And so that is something to consider. We've also seen the largest number of decrease in average applications in these specialties because of these signals, these large signals functioning as an application cap or proxy. Um, Two-tiered signaling is kind of a blend of both, where you have gold and you have silver. There are some large signaling specialties that use two-tiered signals. Gold signals tend to be stronger than silver signals, as you will. You usually tend to have more gold signals than silver signals. OBGYN, there are three gold and there are 15 silver. Anesthesia uses two-tiered, dermatology, and several others. And so what this means is your gold signals are a pretty powerful tool, and you want to make sure you assign them to programs that one, you're really interested in, and two, programs that you have a shot of getting into the best of your knowledge overall. There has been evidence that has come out in the literature that signaling a gold signal in some specialties versus not signaling at all has a 167 times odds ratio of resulting in an interview versus not. That's powerful if you pick the right programs. You'll have a high likelihood of getting interviews at those programs. But if you pick and send your gold signals to programs where you're not competitive, you're essentially throwing away, in instance, some of these signals as well. It's not black and white, obviously. You can't know this with absolute certainty as an applicant, but I'm sharing this information as important trends so you understand kind of the value of these signals going into the process. If you're applying to multiple specialties, you get signals in all of those specialties. If you are applying across application signals in multiple specialties, application services in multiple specialties, you will get more signals in those specialties as well. And so if matching above all costs is the most important thing for you, you may want to consider applying to more specialties because you'll get more signals, more so than applying to every program in a specialty. There is a balance across all of these things. I'm not advocating or trying to discourage anyone from doing anything. I'm just providing data to help you make these decisions. But if it were me, I would not, in big signaling specialty, I would not apply to many more signals in the application cap, regardless of the strength of your application. In a small signaling specialty, I would know that the signals I'm sending have strength and the programs are going to know that I'm interested in going there. And then in the two-tiered signal specialties, I would be very, very cognizant of where I would be sending my gold signals overall, because not only, these signals are changing every year, that it's been very hard to study everything. There is some preliminary data like what I just shared there. There's lots of good publications online that you can read. And I know for students, how many signals should I send? I would send all of your signals in the specialty that you're applying to. There is no disadvantage to sending all of your signals. Is more always better? In terms of using your signals, yes. Not in terms of specialties that have more signals, is the signal better? Actually, mathematically, the more signals a specialty has, the least valuable each signal is, just as the way the math works out. But the programs are also asking on their end, does this signal true interest? They're also trying to guess as they read through your application and your personal statement, your other factors. Is this applicant considering our specialty? For primary care specialties, that's a big question they ask, especially because they know several people are applying across multiple specialties. Some programs get a lot of signals, some programs don't get as many signals. Some program directors are asking, how do we compare against everyone in our specialty? And there's various data that comes out there as well. So keep in mind, again, each specialty sets its own limits in the number of signals that it has. The rules seem to be changing pretty consistently and frequently. It's been hard to kind of set standard controls to measure against variables. There's been a lot of variable changes each year, and programs will also review your signals in context of the rest of your application overall as well. So key part of your application process. One myth or fact. So either shout it out in your head, type it into the chat. We'll do several of these throughout the series, but myth or fact, a small subset of applicants get the majority of interviews, so much so that there isn't enough for everyone to go around. So is this a myth or is this a fact? Type it in, shout it out. Uh, and this is a myth. You may hear of a concept called interview hoarding. You may be familiar with a concept called interview hoarding, and that's exactly what this describes. It's the colloquial term that a small subset of applicants are receiving the majority of interviews, so much so that there isn't enough interviews for everyone else to go around. And the definition of hoarding may vary here or there, but that's the standard definition. We've been studying this since 2019 when people first started kind of labeling it before, during, and following the pandemic. And we've looked at various overlaps of interview groups across programs within each specialty, and that ranges between 5 and 15%, which is really what kind of the distribution you'd expect. And so, if all the people were getting the same, all the programs lists would be much more similar, and you see much more overlap. We've seen that in very competitive fellowships. We've also looked at the distributions of invitations per applicant. That's showing pediatrics here, but I could show you any other curve. Back then, we only had about 30 to 40% of programs using Thalamus. The critique from the community was, well, how do we know this is a representative population? And we said, well, we've looked across geography, program size, kind of all the different traits, and it is representative. But then we started modeling it. We have never found any evidence of interview hoarding, and we've done a lot of looking for it. This is a modeling study we did in orthopedic surgery, where we took interviews from the distribution at the top fifth and top 25th percentile of applicants and redistributed it to the rest of the population. Ortho is a very competitive specialty where 1,800 applicants are trying to match into 1,200 spots. So in theory, everyone can interview everywhere, and still 600 applicants would go unmatched. But what we did, as in redistributing those distributions, the means did not change at all. The number of applicants was actually a much more predictive factor as to what the distributions looked like. And just remember this kind of exponential decay. It was on the prior slide as well. This is the distribution we see in every specialty, and we know this because now we are able to measure. As I mentioned prior, we have 90% of most residency specialties using us, so we have near population level data. This is family medicine scheduled or completed interviews. As you can see here, it's pretty exponentially distributed in terms of the decay. There are some applicants that complete many, many interviews. It is a very, very, very small fraction of the population. We're talking about less than 1/10 of a percent. And if we took those interviews and we redistributed it to the rest of the distribution, it would not change very much. In family medicine and across every specialty, the most common number of interviews an applicants receive is actually 0 in terms of the frequency. The majority of that group are international medical graduates. There are students across all. Please don't draw on the slide. And is there a way for us to get rid of that? Not sure. So not sure what's going on here, but thank you. Oh, I think someone was trying to get rid of it, but in any case, this is a distribution. We can look at any other specialty. These are kind of what they look like. We have not found any evidence of interview hoarding, and thank you for everybody for cleaning that up. And I think the other key piece and why I'm tying this to preference signals, and I think this is very important for applicants, particularly if you're comparing yourself to applicants that applied the year prior. This is showing anesthesiologies. Take the distribution I showed you here, turn it 90 degrees, and it's a violin plot where the peak of the distribution is the applicant that received the most number of interviews, and the width of the distribution is how many applicants received that number. And as anesthesia, and any other specialty for that matter, has increased the number of preference signals, the peak has come down and the base has widened. Preference signals has essentially created the modeling study that we did, which is why we studied it that way. Mathematically, this is what you would expect as you increase the number of signals, because signals, as we talked about, become in some ways a proxy for applications and offers. And so, the applicants that historically would receive many, many interviews, that peak has come down. So what we hear from schools and applicants is, oh, I would have thought I would have gotten a little bit more interviews or a lot more interviews based on my peers from the year prior. That is not always the case. And so what this has created is a little bit of anxiety for applicants because the number of interviews that they expect may be less. I'll tell you that a lot of research that we've done has shown that people over interview, the majority of the market over interviews on both the applicant and the program side. And in primary care, for instance, 35% of interviews have essentially 0% chance of resulting in a match. So we can argue about whether this is good or whether this is bad. We can do an entire webinar series probably just on this. And what it would show is, the pros are it's redistributing interviews to the rest of the population at the expense of kind of those that would be at the top of the distribution. You can argue that those at the top of the distribution are probably going to match anyway. There's a lot of pros and cons to this process, but mathematically this is happening. The reason I show this is I just want you to be aware that you may get a few less interviews than someone of like equal stats or one way or another would have gotten the year prior. Similarly, no match process is identical and no two people are identical, and it's very hard to compare yourself. And this process is incredibly random and it's based on a number of different factors, some in your control, some out of your control, like who else from your medical school or who else around the country that resembles you in terms of an applicant, and whatever way you want to measure that is applying to a particular program. That can impact certain things. You'll never overall know, but I just want you to be aware of this item as well. In terms of preference and program signals, this is the ARIS resource that lists them for this year. This chart continues to get longer. The number of two-tiered signals gets longer. The number of signals per specialty continues to go up year over year is the general trend. And I'd say specialties are trying to set this number to optimize what they're looking to do based on their competitiveness, based upon their application processes. Each specialty tends to have its own leadership across kind of the program director societies that help decide this alongside the specialty organizations that run those specialties. There's a lot of discussion about what kind of the optimal number of preference signals are. I'm not sure there's an optimal number. I think there's a balance that is achieved across these. I think as people are applying to more and more specialties, it also becomes challenging because in some instances, applicants are sending signals to specialties that they're not going to match in, which can confuse the programs. At the same time, I don't fault applicants for doing that. I think it's asking applicants up front to make choices based on preferences that they may or may not even be able to have strong opinions on. And so for the applicants, I would say do your best here. Talk to advisors, talk to friends, talk to colleagues, talk to other students going through the process in the specialties that you're applying to. Do your best. Also know that your preferences are going to change. And in some of the smaller signal specialties, you will get interviews to programs that you didn't signal at a higher frequency. And that's based on the way that the specialty was designed there too, and kind of the number of signals that they chose. So this is a very key part of your application. Lots of studies have come out recently that this is the single largest variable that determines whether or not you get an interview. Programs are not supposed to use this in their rank list overall, and many don't. It's kind of a data point that you can't fully control how people use one way or another. But this is not the only thing that will determine. There's also geographic preference signals. We reviewed last time that geography is a major driver. It used to be the most major before preference signals. Now it is the second most major. And where you grow up, if you're from the US, or where you go to medical school in the US, means you have the strongest likelihood of matching in states that share those locations. So where you grow up, where you went to med school, within that state is your highest chance of matching. For IMGs, obviously that can't be true if you're a non-US citizen IMG or didn't grow up in the United States. If you did grow up in the United States at any point, you have a geographic tie. There is obviously a hometown, and you get some of that effect as well. Specialties will also have geographic preference signals. Some specialties have opted out of that. Others will have that. And so in addition to sending the preference signals, you are able to pick up to three of eight regions, or say you have no preference to any region. Programs in that particular region will know that you've geographically signaled them if they're in that region. They will not know what other regions you assigned. If it were me, I would assign my geographic signals to the areas that have the highest density of the programs that I'm applying to. If you're going to a particular portion of the country that doesn't have as much density of programs, like the Northeast and the West Coast tend to have the highest density of programs. For instance, you're applying to programs in the Southeast, that can help make a difference as well. There is evidence that shows if you signal a program and provide a geographic signal to that region where that program is located, there is a slight increase in receiving an interview. It does not mean if you don't signal a program, but you did send a preference signal there, particularly in specialties that have a high number of preference signals, they that probably won't impact your application, which is why several of the programs, not several, but some of the specialties have opted out of the geographic preference signal. There are also signal statements, as I mentioned before, in some specialties where you can literally describe why you sent the signal, including describing that geographic connection as well. And so there's a lot here. Take a step back from all of it and go back to the kind of the core of what we've been talking about in terms of building your narrative. Who you are as a physician, what patient populations you want to treat, where in the country you potentially want to practice, where you have personal or other familial or other ties, and how does that all come together? That is what the programs are trying to ask. They're trying to determine if we offer this candidate an interview, one, will they interview with our program? And two, will they rank us highly or do we have a chance at matching them? These are the questions they're trying to ask. Of course, as applicants, you're trying to figure out how do I get as many interviews as I can, or how do I get interviews at places I really want to interview at, or some combination thereof. I would try to optimize more, knowing that you need a certain amount of interviews to have a high probability of matching. I think that number is sometimes overplayed, and that's just law of statistics and averages, and we'll talk more about that as we get to the interview section of this series. Um, but you're really trying to optimize getting interviewed at programs where you're likely a good fit, where you're likely well aligned in terms of mission, and also where you're likely to match and where you also want to match. And so that's what you're trying to optimize, not necessarily as many interviews as possible above all costs. Many of you do not need that many interviews, and you only need one interview to match as well. You don't need 50, you don't need 100. In many instances, in many specialties, you don't need more than 10. It's very specialty specific. You can kind of look at the statistics of all the different specialties. There's a lot of data with the NRMP match and the various specialties that can help guide you there as well. But you're really trying to optimize and finding that program that is going to make you the doctor that you want to be. So one other myth or fact, I have a better chance of interviewing and matching at a same state program. I already told you that that's the case. We've studied this in anesthesia and primary care, and using our map here, if you're from Kansas or went to school in Kansas, you have the highest chance of matching there, and then moving to the neighboring states and neighbors, and the effect falls off as you move away. I grew up in New York. I went to residency in California. I now live in Tennessee. People move across the country for whatever reason. That's not to say you can't match into another state, but it does mean to say if you have ties to a state, that is a pretty powerful factor in helping you to match into that state. And that doesn't mean you're applying to the same institution that you're going to school in either. Overall, programs are just trying to assess, are you going to come practice in their program and in their geography? Real quick, in terms of a preview and the match process, kind of leading into our, other sessions of this series. This is Thalamus. On the left is how Thalamus looks today. On the right is an upgrade we're making to Thalamus this year that applicants applying to will get a sneak peek in. We'll do a sneak peek in this series. We will also do a sneak peek webinar that we'll announce to the broader community as well. Nothing's changing so much. The main functionality is there, but we're kind of updating and upgrading everything that we're doing. We're doing a web upgrade. It's just a cleaner user interface based on some applicant feedback to make the process even easier for everyone. We're also redoing our mobile app to match. All products, again, are entirely free to applicants. 80 to 90% of programs will be managed in Thalamus across most specialties. They may interview you and have you interview at virtual, hybrid, and in-person interviews. There are web and mobile versions to schedule anywhere at any time. Eris integration enables early access. As soon as you consume your token to get access to Eris, you'll get access to Thalamus and an email from us to access your account. Support of specialty common interview releases will happen in our site. Applicant data is able to be sent back into the Dean's workstation for those applicants that have schools that use that for their advisors. You can opt in to send your data to your advisors. And we also offer our interview data in the AMC's Residency Explorer, which is a tool you can use to assess your competitiveness in programs. There's a new tool rolling out this year that will also assess interview likelihood that we can discuss further in upcoming sessions as well. For the match, just be aware that application is different than matching. ERIS and the NRMP are different organizations. So you register for the match in the R3 system and do so before January when there are late fees applied. If you're applying to urology, they have their own, they use the ERIS application, but have their own specialty specific match. Residency CAS uses the National Resident Matching Program, and SF Match is one comprehensive system. Please don't forget to register for a match, and fees are required, so register on time to avoid late fees. All right, so we came a little close to the end of time. I'm happy to stay back and answer as many questions as possible. I went a little bit longer than I anticipated. But in summary, and some of these are similar summary topics from last time, but programs are looking for trainees that align with their educational mission. Write your application with a unified narrative of who you are. Signals and geography matter. Understand how each component of your application matters to your candidacy. It's okay to use AI again, but use it for ideas and then make it your own. It starts with self-reflection and figuring out the physician you want to be. And again, don't chase prestige, chase purpose. We'll see you on July 15th for the next session, which is the third or fourth in this first block about building your story. Then we move on to understanding the landscape, navigating recruitment season, and becoming a resident. Looking forward to seeing everyone in these sessions. Again, we're going to post this on YouTube as well, so it's there as a recording. We really, really, really value your feedback. Complete this short survey. This is a session two specific survey. It allows us to continue to guide and change this process. And if you like what you're hearing here, we also are doing a national tour kind of conference that we call Thalamus Synapse. We've done it in 6 cities already, and we have the next 6 cities coming up. Thalamus.org is offering some scholarships for applicants to attend for free. If you're interested in applying for that, please write to us at synapse@thalamusgme.com. These are the 6 remaining cities and the dates that we'll be holding it. It's kind of a med ed meets tech conference. We've had a lot of medical students and residents be a part of it. We've really enjoyed having everyone there and can continue conversations like this there as well. And that was a lot of information tonight. It seems like the chat was happening and popping. Happy to answer any questions. Again, apologizing for going a little bit over, but really wanted to make sure we got all of this information in. And so, questions.